Good evening, everyone. This is Rick Walton, and I'm joined this evening with my fellow colleague.
Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Alex Smith. I'm going to be showing you a bit about compliance and legislation this evening.
And I will be focusing on the state of the property market and a little bit more focus on the investment side of things. So why are we here tonight? This is the first in a series of webinars. It's great to have you all on board. I can see there's quite a few of you clicking in already. I will just talk a little bit of background while a few more people join in, as we expect a few people to trickle in as the evening goes on. Roughly somewhere in the region of 60 to 90 minutes, depending on how many questions we get. We've got quite a lot of content to go through with regards to the Renters' Rights Bill that's in Parliament as we speak at the moment. My background, just so you understand where I'm coming from, I've been investing in property for nearly 20 years. Got a buy-to-let and HMO portfolio based in and around Kent predominantly. So we practice what we preach. And I think that's one of the things that makes us quite unique as a lettings agency, is that all three of the directors, myself, Alex, and my business partner, who's online somewhere as well, I see him logged on, Richard Pointer, we all invest within the Kent market. So this is very not only current to you listening this evening from the comfort of your own home, but this impacts us directly as landlords and portfolio investors as well. So with my business partner, we invest in buy-to-lets, HMOs, blocks of small flats, and our portfolio is predominantly spread between Ashford, Folkestone and Dover. Like I say, we've been doing it for nearly 20 years. Alex, a bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I've been working in the lettings industry for just over 18 years now. I started in 2007, working up in London, where I managed a couple of offices. My now wife and partner back then relocated down to Ashford back in 2011 to carry on my career within lettings. But at that same time, I started my investment journey as well. So over the years, I've built up a small portfolio of buy-to-let properties, which also managed within Lifebet Lettings. Personally, I am a qualified member of Arla Property Mark, and I tend to oversee the day-to-day running of the business at Lifebet Lettings, as well as I take a lead on the compliance and legislation side of things as well.
Okay, brilliant. And you're going to be talking a lot more about compliance, staying compliant, avoiding fines, knowing what you need to know in the current changing market, all that stuff.
There's a lot of change.
Yeah, there's a lot of change.
And we're here to help.
This is the key thing. You know, we've been doing this for quite some time now, and I don't think we've seen quite so many changes in one barrage in one go, have we? So there's a lot going through, and as far as humanly possible, we will be up to date and bang up to date with all the latest changes. And I say it like that deliberately because it's still live. It's still being deliberated in Parliament at the moment. And Alex will give a bit more about timelines shortly on. So I'm going to start kicking things off. Sorry, I forgot to mention, Mayla, if you're in the background, is one of our colleagues. She will be fielding the hello, good evening. So Mayla's in a different location from us. She will be fielding any questions that you may have. So I encourage you, you should see the chat on the right hand side. Feel free to ask any questions and we will do our best to cover all of those this evening if we have time. And that's the big caveat, if we have time. If not, we will make sure that we address those via an email or telephone call as we follow up, okay? But we'll cover as many points as we can. So I'm going to just get my slides up in front of us. And like I say, to start with, we're going to talk a little bit about the current property market and changes that are happening. So there's lots going on at the moment, and we've seen lots of changes over the last few months with regards to changes to sort of hiking utility costs and mortgage rates and all the rest of it. And we just want to give a bit of an update on what's happening right here and now in the Kentish property market. Sorry if you're a little bit further afield, but I think a lot of this will apply to many regions as well. So what's been happening in the marketplace more recently? It's been a very busy spring market, and now obviously we're moving into summer. There has been a lot of buying and selling activity. So there was a massive flurry in the early part of the year where everyone was trying to get their deals, both residential and investment, completed by the end of March because there was this stamp duty deadline. That's been and gone, unfortunately, so you can't take advantage of that. And we've got some quite hefty stamp duty thresholds that we have to pay now on new transactions. Whether there's going to be any changes to that legislation going forward, there's no real sort of conversation about that at the moment, but you need to be mindful of that. As any investor that has more than one property, you will be subject to higher rates of stamp duty, etc. But in the marketplace, there's quite a few more properties coming to the market compared to this time last year. Something like 13% more homes coming to the market, which is great. What does that tell us? No, well, it could mean that there's more people that are looking to get out of the market potentially on one hand, but this is the whole market. It's not just investors, this is residential market as well. So there's lots of properties coming to the marketplace. So there's plenty of potential to find new deals in the current marketplace. 15% more sales agreed compared to the previous month. So things are moving, things are transacting. So that doesn't necessarily mean they have completed, and that's always a caveat. It's not over until it's a done deal. And what I mean by that is there may be some potential investment opportunities for deals that fall out of bed. It's still quite a high percentage of deals that will fall out of bed, but there's generally quite strong demand in the marketplace, that there's lots of sales being agreed, and 8% more buyer demand. So people are in the marketplace to buy at the moment. So if you're looking to sell potentially, and that may be something that you want to drop in the chat, just give us an idea. Are you looking to sell some of your portfolio currently, or are you looking to scale up or grow? So give me a sell or buy, depending on which side of the coin you prefer at the moment. I'll be honest, we've reviewed our own portfolio and reassessed it to see if our own properties are working as well as they used to. We're pleased to say we're keeping most of those, but we will keep an eye on that and may choose to sell one or two properties here and there if they no longer serve a purpose in the portfolio. So just quickly looking at housing pricing generally across the UK. So as a national average, we're seeing sale prices have risen ever so slightly up to sort of 271,000 thereabouts. That represents a 1.4% annual price growth, which is actually less than last month. So there has been a slight contraction in the marketplace, but year on year, it is still more than there was last year. So property prices are still gradually creeping up. Kent, however, as a county, has seen a little bit slower growth overall compared to some areas, but that's no surprise. Down in the southeast, growth, typically capital growth, has always been a little bit slower than some of the other counties, such as up in the north and Wales and Scotland and what have you. So we look at that in a little bit more detail in a forthcoming slide. What does that mean to us in the current marketplace? More homes generally equals more choice. That means as investors, we can bide our time, we can put offers on the table, and we can sit on our hands and wait for those offers to be accepted at a price where it works from us. So it is more of a buyer's market at the moment. It's actually turning, and it's becoming a rather flat market at the moment, because it was very much a seller's market. That has now shifted slightly, and I'd say there's still opportunities to be had, but don't be in any rush to close those deals. Be patient, put your offer at a level that works for you, and bide your time. And that perhaps is being reflected by the number of average homes that are on with the agent at the moment. That's increased slightly from last month, which was 34, and it's now gone to 37. You could say, is that an indication that just more properties are coming to the market? Well, we've already said that there is a higher percentage of properties coming to the market, but it could also be an early indication that perhaps some of these properties are sticking around for a bit longer as well. So they may be taking longer for a seller to sell their property. So maybe time to consider other opportunities where people might see their property go to sale and then fall through once or twice. There could be keep an eye on these properties that are sold subject to contract, because quite often they might reappear back on the market.
Quite motivated at that point too.
Absolutely, yeah. So if they've come back round because they've fallen over once or twice, that seller then could be a bit more motivated to perhaps a different discussion or a different offering, such as a lease option arrangement, or rather than just a straightforward purchase, perhaps. But generally speaking, moving chains are quite fluid at the moment. Because there is movement in the market. There are sellers coming to the marketplace, and there are buyers looking for opportunities. So it's still moving pretty well at the moment. It's not a stagnant market by any means. Coupled with that, we've also got a slight improvement in the mortgage market generally. I'm currently personally in my portfolio going through a mountain of paperwork, which has given me one or two more extra grey hairs over the last couple of months, because there is a lot of questions being asked in the general lending market at the moment. But that said, there is more money coming to the marketplace, I believe, at a cheaper rate as well. So lenders are generally reducing or relaxing perhaps their affordability stress tests, so they're not as stringent in the criteria of what they were asking for with regards to your personal income or the amount of rent to cover the mortgage payments, etc. But generally speaking, there are widely available deals in the marketplace at about 4.7%. Now, those of you that have been investing a long time, including myself, you know, I'm used to the heydays when it was 1.69 and 2%. Unfortunately, those days are gone, and we're not going to see those coming back anytime soon. But money is getting more affordable in the sense that, you know, this time 6-12 months ago, I would be saying these rates were 5.5%, closer to 6%. So money is becoming more available on the 5-year fixed rates. And if you are looking to borrow in personal name rather than limited company structure, you can get deals that are even cheaper than this. So these rates quoted here are for limited company purchases, and assuming that you've got multiple properties in towards the larger properties. If you've got lower loan to value, less properties, and you own it in personal name, you can probably get some better rates than this. Definitely, for sure. Yeah. Obviously, just touching on Bank of England base rate, because obviously that dictates to a certain extent what the banks do with money. It's loosely correlated. It isn't quite as simple as that. But obviously that stayed put at 4.25%, which is not necessarily great for savers, but it is better for us as borrowers looking to invest or refinance properties at the moment. So that's something that, you know, really needs to be monitored, and you should be monitoring on a regular basis, checking whether your properties are coming off of their fixed periods, because some of the standard variable rates are quite strong. I mean, I've got 3 properties in particular that I won't embarrass the lender, but their rates for standard variable rate were going into the 9.5% to 10.5% if I did nothing. So wow. There's the motivation to have a look at the mortgages. So shop around. If you need any advice on that, I'm sure we can plug you in with a mortgage broker should you want one. That's something we encourage you to actively reassess on a regular basis. So just very quickly looking at regional growth, then really Kent-specific data. Here's a quick sort of straw poll of some of the key areas that we manage properties within. So we've got Ashford, which is where we're based as a company. And just out of interest, our personal portfolio is predominantly based around Ashford, Folkestone, Dover, because we know those areas very well. The yields work very good. However, as Ashford shows, the capital growth is not always that great, unfortunately, but strong rents to compensate for that. So it's not all bad. But we are seeing some slight surprises there. You know, quite a bit of increase in capital value in Canterbury and Medway in particular at the moment. But the key thing I draw your eye to is, if you recall from a couple of slides ago, the average national house price was 271,000. Well, I don't see that on any of those figures there. All of those figures in all of these areas across the towns that we picked here, and this is a sweeping statement for Kent basically, is that the average house price is stronger than the average, than the national average. Okay, so there is good capital growth. We can't rely upon that, but it is good if we're looking at remortgaging and stuff like that, because the loan to value will have dropped over time, and we might be able to get more preferential rates as we go forward. So I'm just going to take a breath there. I realise that's quite a lot of information to take on. So Mela, I'm coming to you very briefly. Is there any questions in the chat so far that relates to that section? I'm just quickly having a look myself.
There's no questions about it at the moment, although we've had some sent over to us by email. But I just wanted to tell you that there's a few people that answered your questions about whether they're thinking about buying or selling.
Fantastic. Yeah.
We had Rick saying sell when vacated by tenant.
Yeah. Dave, okay. So you're not forcing eviction or anything like that. You're just naturally, when a tenancy comes to an end, you're not looking to re-let the property. Okay. Fantastic.
We've got David saying that he just sold 2 of his small HMOs.
I think I know the David that is. Hello, good evening. I know you well. So yes, we've had conversations about those, David, and I think in your circumstances, yeah, that makes perfect sense. I know you're consolidating and tidying things up. So yeah, fantastic. Any others?
Yeah, we had Nicola saying she's unsure whether to sell. They just don't seem
I see that one. Yeah.
They just don't seem to make much money compared to the hassle of having them.
Very good point. Yeah, so it depends on how you're managing the properties. Obviously, if you're involved in that and you've got a full-time job in the background, that is going to be a challenge, trying to juggle keeping up with all the regulations and all remortgaging your property and dealing with any maintenance and tenant issues if they're not playing ball and all the rest of it. Yeah, I get that. That can be quite a challenge. I would say this, but obviously as a letting agency, that's where we can come in. And we can help you and support you and all that. And I think one of the purposes of tonight is not a sales pitch at all. That's not what we're here for. It's genuinely to help you in any shape and form we can to help you get the best advice you need right now. So we will be showing a little offering later on, which is an opportunity for you to take advantage, which is completely free, I will say. So if you want to have a little look at reviewing some of your tenancies, we can do that for you and with you. And have a look at how we can perhaps, ignite the fire underneath those properties by increasing rents, checking your compliances in place, and all that kind of stuff. But I'll cover that more a little bit later on. Okay, fantastic. I will continue. So let me just go to the correct slide. Okay, so looking at the rental market, then shifting away from sort of sales and average sales prices. It's not all doom and gloom. We haven't got much capital growth in towns like Ashford, where we're based, but generally across the southeast, we're seeing an increase in rents across the market, and we are definitely seeing this internally, aren't we?
Yes.
Demand is high, supply is not so high, and actually shrinking, I would say. And we could always do with more properties. If you have some that you're looking to let or not shifting at the moment, we will happily look at those for you, because we're seeing strong demand, and we are definitely looking at increasing rents in line with the marketplace at the moment. That's one good thing that we've seen turn a corner 2 or 3 years ago, when the whole conflict in Ukraine, Russia pushed oil prices up and gas prices and stuff like that. We saw a massive increase in utility costs. That was quite hard to shoulder for HMO landlords in particular, where we're paying the utilities as landlords. But that coupled with strong demand and increasing rents has helped compensate for that. So as a letting agent, for our clients, we actively rent review the properties on a yearly basis, because it is an ever-changing market. It's as simple as that. That is way above the national average. You'll see a 2.8% increase generally in the UK. So that is one massive plus point for the southeast and investing down here. Although the yields might be a little bit softer, the actual rate of increase of the rents is pretty good at the moment. And the average rent in the UK is just over £1,300 in the UK. It is actually slightly below that in Kent, but I think because of the rating increase, that'll be catching up very, very quickly. Right, but this is the slowest rate of growth seen in 4 years. What does that mean in real terms? It's not doom and gloom. I'll read the words again. It's the slowest rate of growth. It's not a decline. Okay, it just means it's slowed up a little bit. So where rents may have been increasing to the tune of, say, 10, 12% over previous 6 months or whatever, it's starting to plateau a little bit, but we've still got good, strong growth going on at the moment. Coupled with that, rental yields then. A good estate agent loves quoting a rental yield. With my investor hat on, it's not really worth a lot because it depends on the property and how much you've got to invest into it in order to get it operational and all the rest of it. So don't just look at yields. And I'm sure we'll have some questions about what is the best thing since sliced bread to invest in. We always get that one come up from time to time. I'm not trying to preempt anything, but we invest, as I say, in single lets, HMOs, and blocks of flats. So we do have a varied opinion on what is working better in certain areas. Rental yields generally in the UK hitting 7.4%. Again, slightly below that in the UK, but that's no surprise because of the higher average purchase price and sales price at the moment. And no big surprises. The big hitters at 9.2% at the moment are the northeast. This is in particular the northeast, Scotland, and also slightly further afield, Wales is in that top percentage as well, where they always historically have been, where you've got strong redevelopment, you've got strong creation of new jobs and things like that as well, coupled with much lower purchase prices and reasonable rents, so the yields stack up that little bit better. As an investor, I will declare this, I could not be bothered going hundreds and hundreds of miles and having a portfolio at the other end of the country. That didn't work for me. I used to have a property in Birmingham.
That's far enough.
That was far enough. I sold that one a couple of years ago after it served me for 15 years. But everything I own now is kind of down here in the southeast. My wife still has a couple in Norwich, but that's purely because of family connections. That's all. So rental stock, generally speaking, then we have seen, and don't see this as doom and gloom, I'll explain why in a moment. We've seen a 25% decrease in tenant inquiries over the last month or so. But that's not a negative because we've had an extraordinary volume prior to that. So it is a slight contraction of the numbers. But to put that into context, we've got somewhere of the order of 12 inquiries per property rather than 16. So it's not a case of they've gone from 4 to 3. You know, it's not a tiny number. We're still getting significant inquiries per unit, typically speaking. We have seen a decrease in tenant demand year on year of 16%, but again, it's the same story there. We've had a lot of demand in the past. That's just contracted slightly, and I think this is because a lot more tenants are staying put at the moment. Jobs are a little bit more steady and stable now. We're post-COVID and all that malarkey. There's a lot of people that are just staying put and not moving around quite so much. So therefore, there's not so many people looking for new properties, compared to last month. That said, we are still having super strong demand and plenty of inquiries for new stuff that comes to market. And that's coupled with an 18% increase in overall supply and an 11% increase in new listings. And what I mean by that is completely new properties to the market that haven't come onto the market ever or for a very long time. So this may be a sign of either landlords deciding to suddenly relist their properties that have been with a long standing tenant. You know, in some of my properties, I've had tenants that have been in there for 10, 12, 13 years. It seems crazy sometimes, but I would say the average length of tenancy at the moment, where would you put it at the moment? Like for a buy to let, I would say probably 24, 36 months, I would say so. Yeah, quite a long time.
Our portfolio within the business, we're probably about sort of 50-50 between sort of HMOs and sort of single lets.
Yeah.
And the single lets, they just don't come up very often. So we get new business coming in all the time, but it's the stock which tenants are happy. We tend to find they're only moving on if they're outgrowing the space that they've got, or they're relocating.
Had another child or relocating. Those are typically the drivers for it. And in the HMOs, even we're seeing tenants staying for quite a fair amount of time. I'd say probably 18 to 24 months typically. There will be the exception to that, where you get the odd person that has to move because of job contract, or partner meets partner and they couple up and they go and get a flat or whatever. That's natural progression. You get that from time to time, but generally speaking, we're seeing good long-standing tenants at increased rents, so it's not all doom and gloom. So overall, quite a positive outlook to the property market at the moment. Keep reviewing your properties in the sense of checking your mortgage rates and things like that. Making sure that you're negotiating on your utility contracts as well, because that's another big area that is changing massively. I had a conversation with one of my tenants just today saying internet that he's looking at getting for the property, £27 as opposed to the £46 he was quoted with his current provider. So there's savings to be had on all sorts of areas within the property environment. So Mela, I'm going to come back to you as well quickly and take some questions at this stage. And grab a drink for myself.
Yes, so we've had a question from Della. What do you think is holding Ashford's capital growth back? So many new properties being built?
Yes, probably. In a nutshell, there is a lot. Della, I know where you're located. You're in Ashford like us. There is a lot of new build flats, as you know, in and around the town area. It's a bit saturated for properties of that size coming to the marketplace, both for rental, the high end, ridiculously priced, in my opinion. Some of the flats are, 1 and 2 bed shoe boxes that are coming on for £1,000 plus, which is just not sustainable longer term. They will fly for a while, but I think generally speaking, there is. Ashford is a very different market compared to other areas. It's a lot more based around, I would say, around residential owner-occupiers, perhaps more so than the likes of Folkestone and Dover, where you've got bigger properties that can be subdivided more easily to create more units. There's less opportunity for that in Ashford, and I guess there's more dare I say, kind of like an aspirational owner-occupier mindset more in Ashford, where people are staying put, they're extending their existing property rather than moving because of the costs associated with that. So as a result, because there's less movement, there's less forcing of the capital and the price rises in the area. And coupled with developers are building a shed load more properties as well, there is still quite a lot of stock available for people to choose from. Okay, great question there. Any others, Mela?
Right, yeah, so we've received some questions by email.
Yep.
So I'd like to do a couple of those if that's okay with you.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
One of them says, I've got a flat in Ashford. Is
Yep.
now a good time to put it on the market, or should I wait?
Okay, does it make it clear whether this is for sale or for rental?
I think that's for sale.
Okay, all right, I'll address that, and I'll address the other one very briefly as well. So for sale, it depends, quite simply, as what your motivations are, why you need to or feel the need to sell that property at the moment. If it's because of retirement and you're looking to get out, that may be something we can have a conversation around, because we might be able to find you an alternative solution there, a better solution perhaps. That doesn't mean you have to actually sell it, because my personal belief is, yeah, if we don't have to sell properties, I don't want to, because I like to grow the portfolio over a period of time. But I fully appreciate there are people in the marketplace, and we've been having conversations just this week with clients who are considering for the first time in a long time maybe selling one or two properties to downpay some debt or downsize their portfolio for whatever reason. So I would say you've got to do your due diligence, have a look, but by all means have a conversation with us. We can book in a tenancy health check and have a look at how your property is operating at the moment, if you're renting it out currently, to see whether we can maximize it so you don't have to sell it necessarily. Again, come back to what I was saying about mortgages, making sure that you're reviewing your latest mortgage. Have you reviewed it recently, or have you fallen accidentally onto standard variable rate? That in itself may be the reason that it's not stacking up for you. So I had one that was in danger of going from £600 a month to £1,400 a month on one of the HMOs if I didn't do anything with it. So yeah, I had a motivation to pull my finger out and do something with that. On the rental side, is it a good time to bring the properties to the market? I would say absolutely. We need more. It's as simple as that. Across most areas, I would say, if you could bring me 2-bedroom flats in Ashford, Folkestone and Dover right here and now, I don't think we would have or houses even, I don't think we would have too much problem finding you a tenant inside 10 days easily. There is strong demand for those type of properties, and there always will be at the moment, because there's just not enough of them coming back to the marketplace at the moment. And they represent good value for money compared to some of the other opportunities. Not everyone wants to be in a HMO room. They want to move on and have their own space. They don't necessarily want to share bathrooms with other people and that kind of stuff. So whoever asked that question, great question. And you will see our offering later on this evening. So if you would like to book in a tenancy health check to discuss that in more detail for your particular circumstances, I would love to hear from you. Okay. Any other questions, Mela, at this stage?
Yeah, I think there's an interesting one here. Would you say single lets or HMOs are performing better in the Kent at the moment?
Okay, that I was wondering when that question was going to come up. It always does. Again, it depends on where your property is located, how it is appointed, and what I mean by that is, are you high-end specification, or are you wood chip and magnolia and old second-hand furniture, or somewhere in between? The more tired properties, dated properties, I would say they're not going to be achieving so great rents on the HMO side of things. Tenants are more particular about what their money gets spent on these days.
The expectation from HMO tenants has definitely increased with the
absolutely
the competition of what's out there on the market.
Yeah.
I think even sort of low rental properties, sometimes some of the lower end of the market, the price isn't even at that price isn't enough, because the tenants' expectations are quite high.
Yeah. And generally speaking, from what we've seen, if you show a tenant a small average room at one price and you show them a larger room with a bigger rent, they will naturally upsell themselves, because everyone wants to have a bit more space these days. They don't want to live in a box. And that's not saying we provide rubbish properties. Please don't read it as that. It's just people will naturally go for as much space and comfort as they think they can afford. So just coming back to the question, Single lets, very strong at the moment. The demand is high. The rents have increased, I would say, far more than the HMOs have in the same time period. So rents that were 750 are now approaching sort of 950. In the same sort of time frame, the HMOs have gone from sort of 500 to 600. So nowhere near the sort of percentage increase in that. So I think there is space and opportunities within both sectors, but it depends on how you are financing these opportunities coming into the marketplace. So if you're buying right now, single lets may be the way to go because the money is cheaper, the demand is high, the rents are good, and the cost of getting into those opportunities in the first place is a lot lower than what you would have to fork out in a HMO, because you've got stamp duty, you've got deposit, you've got the works required to convert it to HMO. It all adds up.
The planning, the licensing.
Planning, licensing, there's a few more unknowns. Yes, yeah, absolutely. And we're not really here to talk too much on strategy this month, but certainly for future months, if we feel that that would be something of value, we can perhaps take a deeper dive into some of the different strategies that are working. The focus is much more on Renters' Rights Bill, and probably on that note, I need to wrap things up because I get super excited about this kind of stuff, and this man needs some airtime. So while he's wetting his whistle, just checking in with you, Mailer, is there any other questions that you have come in?
There's just one that came in from Emma, who says, is it worth reducing the debt on the mortgages?
Again, it depends where you are in the life cycle of your investment career. So I know some landlords are looking to do this as they come towards retirement age, where they believe that they might not be able to get any mortgages. But make sure you're plugged into a good mortgage broker here, because there are mortgages available for buy-to-let investors up to potentially sort of 90 years old. They might not necessarily be on the best rates, but I think there are more products coming to the market every day at the moment. I personally don't look to pay down debt in the sense of a repayment mortgage. I like an interest-only mortgage, and then I will stockpile some funds if I wish to pay that down when I choose to. And that's normally at the point of refinance. So let's say I had a £150,000 mortgage today, and I had £20,000 over here. I'm not looking to invest in any other deals. I haven't got a home for that anywhere else. I may choose to pay down that mortgage by 20,000, so I only take out a new mortgage of 130,000 with a new lender. That then gives me choice and flexibility of how I control the payment down of debt over time. Okay, so hopefully that's answered it, Emma. But bottom line is, keep in touch with a good mortgage broker that understands the marketplace and understands your particular circumstances. That's the key thing, and what your plans are. So if you're looking to retire in the next 2 years, you'll have a very different strategy for someone that is looking to scale up in the next 2 years. Yeah. Okay. Excellent. All right. I will draw a line under that there, and I will get Alex's slides ready now. So hopefully you're getting great value out of this evening. We will be now changing away from the sort of property market and the rentals and all that. Like I say, we're moving away from sort of investment strategies per se, and we're now moving into the dizzy heights. Sorry, that is the wrong slide. Apologies, that's my bad. Sorry. That's all right. I just whizzed back to the start. Yeah. Okay. So, Alex, I'll hand you over to Alex now. Alex, introduce yourself a little bit. Tell us a bit about your background and what have you got in store for us tonight.
Yeah. So, So again, my name is Alex Smith. I'm one of the lettings directors and owners at Lifeboat Lettings. I have worked in the industry, as I said, for about 18 years now, and during that time, I have seen an awful lot of change. I started in 2007, obviously when we had the property market crash. It was actually a great time to start lettings because nobody could sell their houses, unfortunately. So lettings was a great time to come in. And when I joined, we just had some legislation come in, obviously regarding sort of deposit registration and that, obviously price.
You're showing your age now.
Yeah. Well, there's sort of the compulsory registration of them coming in then. And then over the years, there's been so many things that have come in. We've had the obviously various hurdles, obviously with COVID, but even like tenant fee ban in 2019, which would ruin the market. It didn't. We moved on, and various bits of legislation throughout the year. So so much has happened. Yeah. I'm just going to share a little bit this evening on some more recent stuff and stuff. A big topic that is probably the reason why you came here this evening is renters' rights stuff. First of all, I want to start on just a little bit on EPCs. Just one slide. It's just a quick update on what's happened recently. We'll then work on to the main part this evening with renters' rights. But So EPC changes. So most of you on the webinar tonight will be landlords, and you'll be familiar with how EPCs work. So they have a spectrum or banding of A to G ratings. Now that spectrum is made up of 100 points, and for the more efficient your property is, the more points you get. So you may have certain energy efficient heating system, or double glazing, or loft and cavity insulation, and each of these things will give you a certain amount of points. So currently the minimum energy rating that we can have to let a property is an E. So that comes to about 39 points. So 39 out of those 100 and above is an E, up to 54, I believe. However, so as of the 15th of June, what the government have done is they've changed the standard assessment procedure rules, so the SAP rules, bring them closer in line with new build properties. Now, so what that has done, it means that energy assessors now, so if they went out to your property to reassess your existing EPC, for example, it could mean that your banding could, or your scoring could change, and in doing so could actually change your banding. So what they're doing now is there's a lot more detail in what they're measuring. So for example, a window, rather than just saying a double glazed window, now they're looking at the actual dimensions of the window and looking in a lot more detail. And so you have to do a lot more work, a lot more evidence, a lot more proof of what you've done to a property to improve it in order to get those points.
So what's the sort of impact then for actually getting EPCs carried out? Does this mean it's going to take a little bit longer? Maybe?
So yeah, so the EPCs are a more thorough thing now. So if you're due to get one done, you may see the price has increased, but it's just, unfortunately, more regulation means that there needs to be more expertise and more attention to detail, and these things do take time, unfortunately. So, so what we sort of recommend to landlords is just bear that in mind. If you have got any properties with EPCs, mid to low E rating on your EPCs, it might be worth getting them checked over sooner rather than later. I suppose the worst case scenario, if you were to look at your EPC, so let's take an example. If you had a long-standing tenant, they had passed their sort of fixed term period and they were just rolling on a monthly basis. At that point, if your EPC expires, you don't technically have to get it renewed. Now, the EPC is required for marketing and at the point that the tenant signs and moves into their tenancy, as well as at renewal as well. But if it's just on a rolling contract, you don't actually need an EPC. So what you could find is your EPC expired. It may have been maybe right on the border with F. You could have 39 points. Tenant moves out, and you think, oh, crikey, I must get a new EPC because the agent's telling me I need one for marketing.
Because it's a requirement. Yeah.
Your EPC assessor toddles along and goes, actually, no, you've got an F. Now,
what does that mean, though? So if you okay, it's not great, and so I think we can obviously see that it means that the property is not perhaps performing as it. But what's the implications to a landlord for renting their property?
Can't let it. Simple as that. Unless you've got an exemption. So obviously the various exemptions that you could have, and we won't go into it tonight. But you could be faced with quite a long void period because you could speak to the assessor and find out where you've dropped points, where can you get points to reassess it and get it back into. But that could take time, and that means that you can't have your agent work on it to try and find you a tenant. Until you've got that ready, and then so you could be looking at months to.
Okay, so what's the workaround for that? Would it perhaps be advisable if you think a tenant might move out at some point in the future? Because how long? Just remind me, how long will EPC last for? I know it's a rhetoric question.
Yeah, they currently last for 10 years. Yeah. So it's, and then they don't cost a lot. So I think we charge £84 including VAT.
Yeah,
lots of people do them, but.
£8 a year.
Yeah.
It's not
so
quite
for the sake of getting one reassessed, so you don't necessarily don't need one mid-tenancy or on a periodic basis. So it might be worth getting it done now, because what you may find is that you can make the improvements whilst you've got the tenant, so that you can then try and get that back up. So if that tenant moves on, or if you wanted to sell it, your EPC is looking a lot more comfortable.
I understand it could be beneficial to have your tenant in situ, because if your tenant is receiving certain benefits, is it not fair to say that you might get some kind of incentive or help?
Possibly, yeah. If they are in sort of benefits, they may be entitled to certain improvements that you as landlord can't actually get.
Fantastic. Okay, so there's a top tip for you. See what the current status of your tenancies are. Check what the EPC ratings are. this is preemption rather than waiting till the tenant moves.
Yeah, and just to sort of finish off on the slide, looking at where the future lies with EPC. So the aim to get to the band C across the board for all properties. So we're looking at all new tenancies from 2028 and all existing tenancies from 2030. So you don't actually have a lot of time to start working towards that band C. You know, this has been around for a while, and
I was just going to say, can we address the elephant in the room, which is, do we think that can is going to be kicked down the road a bit further? Yeah, because it has shifted a few times, hasn't it? Already?
Possibly, yeah. There needs to be, especially with this tightening up of the SAP rating and how the energy assessors are doing these reports.
Yeah.
You know, it just makes it even more difficult to get back up to the C, because you might be like, oh, I'm in a D and I haven't got far to go, and then you get it reassessed and oh, now I'm down in an E. So, yeah, it's
if we have some time later on, perhaps we can look at some examples of some of the things that we're doing within our portfolio that might give you some pointers as to what's it. But I think generally speaking, in order to get an exemption, I think you called it, certain works will be expected to have been completed, or at least attempted.
Well, yeah, there's the the improvement caps, which I think are currently at like $3,500 for a property. That's looking to go up to, I think it's about 15,000, and that would be what you expected to actually spend out of your pocket to be able to get an exemption.
Ouch.
So if the improvements are going to be 20 grand, then you can work on that basis.
Yeah.
Obviously, other exemptions briefly on it. You're looking at like listed buildings and stuff that is you just physically.
Yeah, because obviously there are things that cannot be upgraded because it would be against conservation or building. Yeah. Okay, fantastic. Okay, moving on then. The hot topic of the season.
Yeah, so the Renters' Rights Bill. So this has been quite a journey, and it might make you look dizzy looking at this on the screen, but I'll quickly whiz through it. So the Renters' Rights Bill was part of the Tories, Renters' Reform Bill. So it's in a former life, which was under the Tories, that were trying to get it through prior to sort of the snap election last year. I think when it sort of failed, I think all landlords and letting agents took a big sigh of relief and thought, well, yeah, here we go. Maybe we might be in a bit of luck here. Unfortunately, it was part of Labour's manifesto. So as soon as they got into power, then it was full steam ahead with the new Renters' Rights Bill. So given the majority that Labour have in the House of Commons, it did fly through the House of Commons without too much many problems. Entered the House of Lords back in sort of mid-January this year. Has had a couple of delays here and there, but as you'll see, it's progressed through the middle screen through the first reading, second reading, the committee stage, which is sort of the nuts and bolts of of what they're looking at. We're now sat in the report stage. So the report stage, they had 3 days or 3 sittings allocated to the report stage. First was on the 1st of July, then we had one on Monday this week on the 7th, and then we've got one next week on the 15th. Now, there has been some amendments chucked out at this time, a couple of changes, and we'll get onto a few of those later. So it's all still to play for, but not a lot's going to change. Now, the problem we've got now is we've got the Commons are due to clear off for their nice summer holidays.
Imminently.
Yeah. So report stage, obviously, will be finished on the 15th. We've then got the 3rd reading, which is set for the 21st of July. The Commons are due to rise for summer recess on the 22nd of July. So it's looking a little bit tight, but following the 3rd reading, the consideration of amendment is the sort of the back and forth between. Yeah. So the Lords are finished with it, they chuck it back across the fence, the Commons go,
what's the best guess crystal ball at the moment? When do we think it's going to be coming in?
I tend to be a positive. So I don't think it's going to make it through this same. But if it doesn't make it before summer recess, it will definitely happen as of start of September. So I think the Commons and Lords, they return, I think it's around the 1st. Labour do have, well, all the houses, they do break for their conferences from the sort of 16th of September. So we've got just over a couple of week period from the 1st to the 16th where, to be honest, Labour are going to probably want to sort of full steam push this through because it'll be a massive win.
For them.
Yeah, so they can go to their conference and say, yeah, we got this passed. So I think personally,
it's not necessarily from landlords, but what's this space?
Yeah. Excuse me. So I think we will see it passed early September, in my opinion. We then have to think about when the commencement date's going to be. So I think there's not been any promises, but there's been suggestions that there could be, you know, a few months, hopefully sort of 3 months for us to get adjusted to before things.
So this is for landlords and lettings agencies alike,
so
to
the
get
actual,
their heads around the implications
so the
of the change.
commencement date, implication date. So yeah, it's probably going to be later in the autumn, early winter.
And what's the gut feel? Do we think it's going to be, they're going to bring all of the things that are changed and altered by Renters' Rights Bill in one go, or do we think that there's going to be certain things that happen instantly, then a few bits and pieces follow up? What's the gut feel?
You spoiled my presentation, mate. But
we'll hold that one.
No. There is a lot of it is coming in. So the thing about Renters' Rights Bill, it's not piecemeal. There's not. You could take any bit of the Renters' Rights Bill, and it could be introduced as a separate bill or legislation or regulation at any time. But it's basically all encompassing. So there's so many things they wanted to start straight away. For the majority, there will be some just from the logistics and sort of organisation that just haven't been able to arrange it, so there won't. But we'll go through that as we sort of proceed through the slides this evening.
Fantastic.
Before we move on to the next slide, I just want to say a big caveat, and Rick mentioned earlier, things are still changing. So we saw changes on Monday this week, which were quite surprising, which were great news. But things could still change and go backwards. So you know, I'm just presenting what we know is best to our best of our knowledge here tonight. Obviously, any changes, if you're on our newsletter, obviously we can keep you updated that way as things develop.
Okay, let's just take a pause there. Mela, coming to you. Are there any questions at that stage, just to give Alex a little bit of a breather and take a drop of water?
Very hot.
I can see it. It's quite warm in here. It's 27 degrees outside where we are, so it's a bit warm in the office this evening. I can see a couple of bits coming in.
Yeah, so we had a question on email about EPC. If I can just go back to the EPC bit.
Absolutely. Yep.
How do I know what improvement will actually increase my EPC rating?
This is a really good question, and one that I have had with a good friend of mine who carries out our domestic energy assessments. That is his profession. He's the guy that does EPCs internally for us. He happens to be a good friend of mine, and the long and short answer is nobody knows, because even the domestic energy assessors weren't given a massive amount of warning as the implications of this, or the fallout rather. So the current belief, best guess belief, is that there will be a slight downgrading from the current system because of the additional information around windows, you said, and light bulbs and this, that, and the other. So if you were a D at whatever the score was, 50 points, it might go down to a lower D at 48 or something like that. Just a couple of points.
I think, it may not. It may even go up, because see the detail that they're looking at. The assessor that may have done your EPC may have not put in as many details about the heating system that you've got, and now if there's more detail looking, they could actually help. But you know, it's better to err on the safe side of caution if you're on that low sort of E bracket.
That's a really good point as well. I know in some of our properties, I'll put my hand up, we've got some Ds and potentially some Es in the properties that we're looking to actively improve right at this moment in time, and we're going through a phase of reinvestment to do some of these modifications. And I have no problem reinvesting in the properties, but I want to know that my money is spent in the right areas and making sure that and I don't think we're quite there yet. Okay, so watch this space on that one is the short answer, really. We are doing some test cases within our portfolio where we're taking some properties that are borderline and seeing how they're effective, because like Alex said, for the nominal cost of doing an EPC, you know, for the sake of 80, 90 quid, it gives me the information I need to make an informed decision.
I've just noticed a question come up from Matthew. Sorry to read out. Sorry, Mel, I'm stealing your job here. Do you believe the recent amendments that have been backed by the House of Lords are good?
He's asking us to get on our political soapbox.
Do you think the House of Commons will reject them and ping pong between? Yes, I think so. And this is where I think we have to not get too excited about some of the wins. So we are seeing some wins, and I say we'll get into those in a bit later. But don't forget, when it goes back to the Commons for this ping pong with this consideration of amendments sort of phase, the Labour do have the majority, so they could poo-poo some of these if they really wanted to, and then send them back. So, and you know, that could be good because it could actually stall things, take a bit of time back and forth, and then it will push things into September.
Politicians not agreeing, surely not. Whatever next.
Emma, any news on paying the local?
Yeah, rather than second guess that one, can you just clarify that question, because I'm not entirely sure what angle you're coming from there, Emma, but happy to answer if we can.
Yeah.
Just closing out on the EPC one, jumped around a little bit there. I think what I was going to say is we are actively asking our energy assessor to reevaluate some of our properties. Don't wait, get the line in the sand, because one thing the EPC does do is in the back of the EPC, it will give you the anticipated improvements that will give you the biggest pound for pound return, basically, and that's what we're looking at. I don't want to, I mean, there was one that was laughable on one of the EPCs from several years ago that was spend 7,000 on solar PV and the increase was about 3 points, and the energy saving was £22 a year or something like that.
Over 20 years.
Look at that as a return investment. That's not particularly good. Versus put some loft insulation, which is far easier to do, is not that expensive in the grand scheme of things, and your tenant might get some grants to do it in the first place. So yeah, there's have a look at what is most effective for that. Any other questions coming in, Mailer?
Not for at the moment, no.
Okay, we will plough on because I know Alex has got lots of great content that he wants to crack on with.
We'll go for a couple. We'll do the next 2 slides, then we can have a quick break.
Yeah, we'll have a little break.
Feel free to put the questions in as we go.
Yeah, keep putting the questions in, and then we will come back to those. Okay. So
so this abolition of Section 21. So this is definitely one of the sort of the headlining things within the bill. Now, Section 21s have been around since the Housing Act 88, so I've always known them in my time, and there may be some lettings veterans on the call today. They may have even seen when they were first introduced, but we have become very used to them and relying on them to regain possession of our properties. Now, I can understand why the government have brought them in, and there's various reasons for that. I don't necessarily agree with it, but it's definitely a vote winner, whichever government bring them in. When it comes to the lettings industry, I think we're quite creative people, and as legislation is always changing, I think we adapt. So when I think about the Section 21, I say I have used it a lot over the 18 years I've been in lettings, but there's other ways of doing it, and I think I looked recently at the Section 21s that we've actually served so far this year, and the majority of those fall into sort of 3 categories really. So it's either landlords wanting to sell a property, either wanting to move back in themselves, or sort of severe rent arrears. So all of those will fit into the grounds, even the mandatory grounds within the Section 8. So I'm not personally, I'm not overly concerned. I know there is a lot of uncertainty with landlords, and potentially some that are on the call this evening. But I think there is hope, and there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And I think what's not helped is all of this Renters' Rights Bill and the Renters' Reform Bill before. It's been dragged out for so many years. I remember doing a presentation at a networking event probably about 2 or 3 years ago, which was probably about the Renters' Reform Bill that was on its way, and this is definitely happening. And here we are, so far down the line now, and it is happening. But it's not been a rip off the band-aid sort of thing. It has been quite a drawn-out process. So,
is it fair to say as well, Alex, that with the Section 21s, I think the people that fear its disappearance the most is perhaps those who are maybe using it as an incorrect tool to get the property back? I know that's what Parliament was looking at avoiding, was retaliatory evictions and stuff like that.
I think it is one. I think some people probably have overused the Section 21 and relied on it too much. You've got, this won't apply to anybody who's taken the time to go on this call tonight, but there are still plenty of rogue landlords out there who, and I know one in particular in the past that fortunately I never worked with directly, but they were quite happy to have tenants in a property for 6 months. Tenants would then move out because they're fed up with all the maintenance. The landlord would sort of patch it up as best he could and then move another tenant in for another 6 months. That tenant would get fed up and move out. But they're not looking after the tenants. You look after, you provide a good property, you get a good tenant, and they will look after it. And then you've got a nice long-term tenant. You don't have voids. They look after it themselves, and it's a give and take relationship. And I think some people have taken too much, and
But just to come back full circle on what you're saying about as an agency, we have served a few, and like you say, we've seen somewhere landlords have wanted to move back into their property, so that's a genuine reason for wanting to come back into the property. But I have to say, the serving, I mean, what have we got? Nearly 300 tenancies on our books. How, as a percentage, it is a tiny percentage, probably low 1–2%, if that, of the overall tenancies that ever get a Section 21 served on them, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a very, very small percentage. It just sounds bad because normally it's coupled with rent arrears or something like that. So they tend to be the scare stories that you hear about the most, aren't they? Anyway, sorry. Just conscious of time.
Yeah, that's fine.
Validity of current notices.
Yeah, so notice, so this Form 6A, which is the Section 21 notice, it's valid for 6 months. Basically, I don't want to sort of teach you to suck eggs on this call, but you do have the 2 months notice of that 6 months that you give to the tenant, and then you have the 4 remaining months to act on that and seek possession. Now, if you're going to serve a Section 21, so if you've got any tenants you're not sure about, do it now. Don't delay. You can still use it. You can still issue it. You can still ask tenants to move out at the end of the 2 months. Now, what has been said, when we get a commencement date for the Renters' Rights Bill, there will be a bit of an overlap. So if you have got a valid Section 21 notice, then I think they said up to about sort of 3 months beyond the commencement date that you can still potentially use it. I believe you may have had to have instigated the court process before that 3 months. So again, this is all a bit up in the air at the moment, but you still have got a window if you wish to use it.
Okay, so it's not all doom and gloom yet. There is still a window of opportunity to do that. But in summary, when it does switch over to your next slide, which we're going to in a minute, there is still strong grounds, we believe, in the future for gaining possession under the right circumstances.
Yeah.
Okay, and on that note.
So, ground 8. So Section 8 grounds. So, for anyone who has done a Section 21 notice and a Section 8 notice, you'll know they do vary quite vastly in the attention to detail and the amount of evidence that you need. And this is sort of echoed throughout the whole of the Renters' Rights Bill. We're referring to as a new world, and it's going to be an evidence-based world that we move into. Yeah. So with a Section 21 notice, if you're serving that, basically Form 6A is 2 sides of paper. You've got about 4 bits of information, a quick signature, and as long as you've served all the sort of Deregulation Act documents, like at the start of the tenancy, you've registered the deposit, you've given the HMO license, all the gas certs, everything like that, then it's fairly safe, plain sailing. Now, if you try to do that with a Section 8 notice, there's an awful lot more detail in there. So if you've got somebody in rent arrears, so you may typically use sort of ground 8, which is the mandatory ground, and a couple of discretionary grounds, 10 and 11. You've got to give evidence for all of those. You've got to state why you're using them. It's a much more thorough document and a lot more detail. Yeah. So as we move into the Renters' Rights Bill, I think, yes, we're going to see that a lot. It's just like, it's that attention to detail and, crossing every T, dotting every I.
So this just reiterates the necessity to keep great documentation, as always, which has always been the case, because it's a bit like a divorce, isn't it? Everything's fine when it's going well, but if a relationship goes sour, that's when it's very difficult to get this stuff in place retrospectively. Well, it's almost impossible in most cases. Yeah. So the necessity to make sure the documents are served correctly and all the rest of it, this is what we're really keen on, is making sure you're compliant and you've got all that in place.
Definitely. Okay. So I just want to go into a couple of the key grounds. So the topics that I mentioned in the previous slide, sort of the areas where I could have used the Section 8 instead of the Section 1. So landlord selling, landlord moving back in rent arrears. I just want to go into those in a bit more detail, sort of explaining how they're going to be working. So so the grounds that you can see in front of you, so 1A, 1 and 8, they're all mandatory grounds, which means if you can prove it, a judge would have to give you possession, compared to the discretionary grounds, which you may be able to prove, but a judge at the end of the day could say, oh, actually, you got the tenant giving them a sob story in court, and then they could leave in favour. But the mandatory grounds, they have to give you possession if you can satisfy them. So ground 1A, so if you were looking to sell a property, I just want to sort of give you an example of how it would be used. So if you had a tenant, say, for example, moved in on the 1st of January, they will then enter into what we call a protected period of 12 months. So you would need to give a 4 months notice in line with ground 1A to sell the property. So you need to give that from the 1st of September to expire at the end of December. Okay. Once that has expired, so and I suppose all going well, the tenant actually moves out at the end of that 12-month period, you then go into what we call a restricted period. Now, I suppose there's some good news from this week, which may change, but we were then going to go into a 12-month period of a restricted period, and it's now down to 6. And during that restricted period, you are not allowed to re-let or advertise that property to let. Wow. So you have to commit to actually selling that property. I'll say that's why we're quite pleased it's gone down to 6 months, because it was going to be 12 months, in which, you know, and if you just sort of taken a stab at selling your property and then that falls through,
or dare I say it, disguising getting your property back because you're selling your property.
Yes,
that's what they were trying to prevent, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But on the flip side to that, if your circumstances legitimately changed and you didn't want to move back into that property or sell that property anymore, you couldn't then rent it out for 12 months potentially.
Yeah.
Which is going to obviously financially have a massive impact, isn't it?
Indeed. Yeah, so that's been reduced down to 6 months, so that's good news. Ground 1, that's another mandatory ground if you wish to move back in. So if you're the landlord, again, there would be a 12-month protected period from the date that the tenant first moved in. You would need to give 4 months notice. So in my example, if they moved in on the 1st of January, it'd be the 1st of September. You give 4 months notice, they would then have to move out as of the end of December. Now that would be, if they did move out, you then actually, if you're looking to move back into the property, you do have a 12-month restricted period where you cannot do anything with it. In that period, you can either move in yourself, your spouse, civil partner, your parents, grandparents, and then down to your children and grandchildren. Also looking at what they call half-bloods, which so if you have one common ancestor, so if you share a parent, so like a half-sister or half-brother, that's right. Now,
basically not for commercial benefits.
So
you can't rent
any of those people related to you can move back into the property. Now, what you've got to be careful is, you move your son in there, works in there for 2 months, then gets a new job and relocates to the other part of the country. You then think, I can re-let it now. No, you're still in a restricted period for they've only been there 2 months.
Wow.
You've got 10 months where you can't do anything with it other than living in it yourself. So this is where you need to be thinking ahead of what you actually want to be doing, long-term planning with your properties.
And I know we don't necessarily know the exact answer right now, but if I was to put my property on the market to sell now, I wouldn't be held to the same conditions in the future, would I? So if I'm selling the property today, I'm not serving Section 8 grounds.
No.
So I just choose to put it on the market. Okay, fantastic. So again, another reason that if you're thinking of selling, now may be the time to do that. But again, have a conversation with us. Let us do a tenancy health check first so we can see if there's any ways that we can keep that asset within your control, and you might not have to sell it as well.
I'll just, of course, just to finish on that ground 8. So that's it's a very common one. There have been some changes. It has been beefed up a little bit. So under the current rules, if a tenant is in, if they're a monthly payer, if they're in 2 months worth of arrears, you would, after 2 months, you would need to give 14 days notice. Now, under the Renters' Rights Bill, they're increasing the rent arrear period to 3 months. Then the notice period would go from 14 days to actually up to 28 days. So you've got the best part of 4 months when you wouldn't be able to do it until you can actually apply to courts. So I think it's just something to bear in mind. I think you would probably need to look into more like rent protection sort of policies, things like that, because there's longer periods where you could, as a landlord, could be going without rent for your property. Okay.
Absolutely.
Are there any questions, Mailer, at all before we move on to the next slide?
Yes, we have a question from the emails. I've got a problem tenant which is causing me aggro with his neighbours, who have my numbers, as I used to live there myself. Will I still be able to get them out?
So neighbours, they're giving the landlord aggro or the neighbours aggro? Sorry.
I think the tenants are giving aggro to their neighbours, so he's trying to.
So
can we get rid of them?
So you would, depending on what that aggro was. If it was tackling that knife point, then that would be slightly different. If it's just they are a bit of an annoying neighbour, you probably would struggle proving any of the mandatory grounds. You've got ground 7A, which is a mandatory ground for a severe antisocial behaviour. That's more looking at sort of if you're convicted, so any sort of crimes and things like that. So it'd be a very difficult one if they're just a bit of a pain. I suppose you could look at more discretionary grounds. So you also have an antisocial discretion ground, which is ground 14, I believe. Again, they need to be convicted or something. So there are other discretionary grounds. So you can look at if they are causing any damage to the property or damage to or just a general breach of their tenancy. So there's various grounds, sort of grounds 12, 13, up to 15 you could use for various nuisances. But again, you've got to be able to prove them, and then you've got to rely on the judge in court saying, oh yeah, you know. So it's very difficult.
I think also, I don't know if this was where the angle of the question was coming from. Where does the jurisdiction between what you are responsible for as a landlord or a letting agent versus, hang on a minute, these are adults and they're supposed to be living and getting on with each other as well. We do see that from time to time, and we've helped our clients navigate through these kind of conversations where at the end of the day, every tenant has to act in a tenant-like manner, and part of that is paying the rent on time, looking after the property, and not annoying the hell out of our neighbours and what have you. And I certainly don't want my business to affect my neighbours, and it shouldn't do.
No.
But you know, we are limited with our powers as letting agents and landlords if you know, a tenant does decide to be a little bit unruly. Obviously, if it is, as you've alluded to, if it's a criminal activity, then it needs to be reported the correct way through the police and all the rest of it.
Yeah, I've just noticed that one message come up, Mela, from Nigel. If the rent arrears are paid off during the period, does the whole process start again? So
that's a good one.
Section 8 notice lasts for 12 months, so a lot longer than a Section 21. Now, if you are taking them to court for trying to get possession under ground 8, so as long as they are in at least 2 months worth of arrears at the point the notice is served and at the point of the hearing, then you're okay. So what we've done in the past sometimes is if a tenant has gone through a bit of a bad patch, but not necessarily a bad tenant, we can issue the Section 8 notice to just to future-proof and protect the landlord if the arrears get worse. We've had then tenants may pay off the arrears, but in 6 months' time it may sort of ping back up, and then we're still covered under the same Section 8 notice as the ground 8. So yes, what you have to be very careful, and I had this when I was in court last year. Tenant was had made a payment on the morning, and I don't think he really appreciated the law, but he was about £5 off. Just £5 over the 2 months worth of arrears. I was saying, unfortunately, there wasn't like a court liaison there who probably would have told him to hand us a fiver and be done with it. And we would have get kicked out of court. But fortunately, that didn't happen. But people are getting very knowledgeable on the law, and there's a lot of advice out there for tenants to try and beat the system. So we need to be one step ahead of those people with the knowledge that we have and what we do.
Okay. Just conscious of time because we've got to crash through a load of content. Yeah. Alex.
So you can tell it's our first one. We are very chatty. Right.
Like two excitable children.
Yeah. So end of a fixed term tenancy. So I think this is up there with Section 21. So on the concern list for landlords. I understand why the government are doing it, to give the tenants flexibility, not being tied down to long-term contracts, if they're sort of family or work require them to move out of an area, or if they're in a poorly maintained property, and I think that's well within their right to move on. So I think that's there are sort of good and bad things about it. However, so what's going to happen with the existing tenancy? So as soon as we get to the commencement date of the Renters' Rights Bill, every tenancy in the land will become not every tenancy, but every tenancy under the Housing Act will become assured periodic tenancies. So that'll be an automatic switch, and as of that date, every new tenancy will also need to start on a monthly rolling periodic tenancy. Okay. Now, notice periods will be extending for tenants. So if you are a tenant in a periodic tenancy as it stands, it would be 1 month's notice typically. In the new world, it will be 2 months' notice that they need to give you. Now, tenant could move in on day one, and they could then serve a notice. It typically would need to be in line with the rent due date. So they moved in, go back to my example, moved in on the 1st of January. They could serve 2 months' notice from the 1st of February, and then they could be moving out by the end of March. So we could be looking at some shorter term tenancies. Again, as an industry, we will adapt. If there is a high turnover, that will mean rents will go up to cover sort of relet costs. So again, I'm not too concerned. I think as an agency, we have always used periodic tenancy, so we always do tenants initially on a 6 or 12-month tenancy, and then we've always allowed them to roll on monthly because it allows sort of flexibility for landlords and for tenants. And I think that works. I think people still feel that they've got stability there, even on a monthly rolling.
I sort of know the answer because I'm closer to the fire and I see the information. But from your perspective and your experience, what are tenants looking for at the moment? Are they looking for transient nature, or are they looking for a bit more stability and stability?
I think I've seen a few more people coming through looking for shorter term lets, and as it stands at the moment, the minimum we do as an agency is 6 months. But I see that will change, and I think we just need to avoid, try and just the way we reference tenants and how we're qualifying them before they even view a property is just making sure that we can try and work out what their intentions are. Because as landlords, you still have a choice. If you've got 5 applicants for your property and one says, I'm only going to be there a month, then I'm going to give my notice, and the others are saying, oh, I want long term, you still have a choice. So that wouldn't be discrimination at that point. It's just your choice that you wish to do. So I don't see it changing things too much. So we've mentioned here about pending renewals. So some landlords I know are trying to get renewals in, but something you can do if it works for you and your tenants, then why not? If it gives them a sense of security over the next sort of 4 or 5 months before we sort of see any sort of commencement date with the Renters' Rights Bill, then why not? But I think it's worth letting them know sooner rather than later that, well, we can do that, but this is what's going to be happening. And I think the Renters' Rights Bill is meant to be for tenants, but in my opinion, not a lot of people actually know about it other than landlords and letting agents. So I think this is when tenants get a letter or at the commencement date saying that they now have to give 2 months notice rather than 1 month's notice. I'm sure we'll get some moans, but it's all for them. That's what we're doing this. So
I think that just the pending renewals, there is a driver there for landlords, perhaps, and the more the focus is, which I know you're going to cover a little bit later on, is around rent reviews and making sure you're keeping rents up to date and stuff like that. So that could be more of a driver rather than to try and lock in a tenancy for a longer period of time, because it's going to become a moot point at some point.
And just to finish this slide about sort of tenancy statements. As of the commencement date, so any new tenancies, we don't quite know what they're going to look like yet. There's been talk of model tenancies. However, it's probably more likely to be a prescribed list of ingredients that we need to be putting into the assured periodic tenancies. Those that are existing tenants, obviously, I think we will need to give them a statement of what's happened. I think we've got 28 days from the commencement date to actually issue that to the tenants to make sure that they're aware of what's happened, the changes to their contract, and any sort of clauses within their original tenancy which have changed. So, but again, we don't know a lot about that just yet, but we will do soon.
Watch this space. So I don't want it to come across as all doom and gloom. There's a lot of changes going on, and there's still more for us to cover this evening. But one thing I just wanted to drop in at this point, if I may, is we are here to help, and this is the whole purpose of these webinar series, is to offer advice and information and sort of little top tips and things you should be considering now before it's too late and all the rest of it. And as I mentioned earlier, I'll just bring this into the chat here so you can see this. We've got an offering just for the period of this live event this evening. You hopefully can see that free compliance health check. We call it a tenancy health check. If you have got concerns about a tenancy at the moment, you're not sure whether you're looking to sell or retain a property, now is the time to get in touch with us. Offering a free opportunity to do that, please do reach out to us, because we will go through a whole compliance list here, making sure that you've served the right documentation on the way into the tenancy, your prescribed information, your deposit protection, making sure you've got all your necessary certificates. Alex briefly mentioned about deregulation, making sure that you've got logs of your maintenance and repairs and stuff like that, as well as your energy performance certificate, your electrical inspection condition report. Don't worry if this is just all jargon to you at the moment. We can guide you through this and help you navigate it. But one of the key outcomes of that is identifying any shortfallings now so that you avoid massive fines, penalties, but most importantly, you remain profitable as a landlord, so you can continue to rent that property out. Because what we don't want is landlords having to sell their property because it just doesn't work for them anymore. So we're trying to avoid that. This will cost you nothing other than a little moment of your time, and we're prepared to put that in. So if you clicked on the book your compliance health check now, you will see my diary comes up there, and I've got a whole bunch of dates and times available. Encourage you to have a look. If you know that's something you want to do, get in there fast and book that, because my calendar is going to be busy for next week, I anticipate. That is a free offering. It will normally last, say, 30 to 45 minutes. And like I say, we go through a whole load of things there around the tenancy. But more importantly, we're also doing rent review check there, which I know you're going to talk about in a moment. Making sure that we look at increasing the rents now while we can, before there's too many challenges to that. That in itself, coupled with a little mortgage review, might be enough for you to continue renting your property for the next 3 to 5 years, perhaps. Okay, so encourage you to put that. I'm going to leave that in the chat, so you should see that, and we'll come back to that offer a little bit later on. But back over to you, Alex. So on to the next slide.
Excellent. Well, I've got some good news. Rent reviews. We're still allowed to put the rents up, which is great.
Good. Well, at least they haven't rent controlled that to the ground yet.
So rent reviews are going to be available every 12 months. Now, the way in which you do rent reviews, at the moment, there's quite a few ways that you can do it, either with a new tenancy, you can do it by agreement between landlord and tenant, you can do it through a fixed sort of tenancy clause within the tenancy agreements, which put rents up at set amounts, set periods, or Section 13 notice. Now, under the Renters' Rights Bill, the only way we're going to have available to us is the Section 13 notice. This is the only way that we do rent reviews, and if you're not familiar with it, I just want to quickly run through it. So as it stands now, with Section 13 notice, you have to give 1 month's notice in line with the rent due date, informing the tenant that the rent's going to go up. Now, if they disagree with that, what they can do is they can approach what's called the first tier tribunal, and they can then make a case against the rent. The tribunal will potentially take a couple of months, and what they will do is they will assess that rent, and they will either see if it's fair or if it's too high, and they can reduce it. If it's too low, they can actually increase it. But importantly, at this moment in time, what they can do is they will then backdate it to the end of that notice when it first expired. So when the tenant should have been paying their new rent, they will then be paying the agreed rent that's gone through the first tier tribunal. Now, under the Renters' Rights Bill, the Section 13 notice has been extended to 2 months, so there's a bit more time for the tenant to sort of mull it over. If they were to then pass it across to the first tier tribunal, the first tier tribunal have a slightly different approach now. So they will no longer consider rents that are too low and put them up. They will only now agree, or they will reduce it if they think it is too high. And the key thing, which is annoying a lot of landlords, is that period is not now backdated, because it's deemed unfair for the tenant to go into arrears, unexpected costs and all of this. So that was a big change. I think the Secretary of State has put an amendment in the bill to say that if tenants take the mick and this is happening too much, then they can look to adjust that. And you never know, something may go through for the amendments that are left at this time to try and sort of change that slightly. But yeah, the concern is that tenants will think, well, rather than pay my rent in 2 months' time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to contest it, and I'm just going to kick the can down the road, knowing that I won't have to pay that increased rent until 6 months' time, for example.
So, am I right in hearing this could mean that what you believe to be a rent increase every 12 months actually becomes a rent increase every 15 to 18 months if they push back against it? Yeah. So, what do you think the impact of that is going to be on the wider rental market? It's kind of a loaded question.
If I can, so I worked in the industry 18 years.
Yeah.
In the 8 years of that we've had life bit lettings, we have never had a case go to the first tier tribunal.
Yeah.
It's not something that happens a lot. And I wasn't, I worked in some more sort of corporates, high street lettings beforehand, which I wasn't necessarily dealing with that side of the business. But it's not actually that many. You look at the numbers of the previous years; they're less than 1,000 across the UK. But obviously, the concern is that more people will do this. But I think if you're keeping your rent reviews reasonable as we go into the Renters' Rights Bill, I think you just work with your tenants, communication. And as I say, we're going into this evidence-based world that you need to be able to prove it. So obviously, if you do come across a dispute, it's how do you prove that you are fair in the rent that you're suggesting. But if you're having open dialogue and communication with your tenants, as we do, and we always try to keep rent reviews slightly below where the market rents are. So if tenants aren't,
but still aggressively pushing them up where we can.
Yes, yeah, definitely. It's not all doom and gloom. I think just work with your tenants and you'll be fine.
Okay.
But now is the time to do rent reviews. If they are a bit low before we get in, there's no limit to how much you can increase them at this time.
Yeah.
So yeah, far away.
Yeah, and we're not saying put them up unscrupulously. We're not saying that, but
No.
they need to be in line with market, because the downside to that, I have some discussion with a landlord that is thinking of selling 1 or 2 properties. If the tenant vacates that property because the landlord is genuinely selling that property,
Yep.
and they've had a below market rent, they're going to go out into the open market and go, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
the rent that I thought was 700 is now actually 950, £1,000. And then they're going to be very out of balance with the real world, aren't they?
Exactly.
So I'm not saying you're doing them any favours, because obviously no one wants to be paying, higher rates than they need to be. But on the same note, it is about making sure that we're keeping track with the market and the trends.
Yeah. Mela, we're going to pause there. Is there any questions at all? Sorry, we can't see the chat now for some reason, but.
There we go. Just put it back on the chat. Yeah.
Yes, so there was a question on email about the end of fixed term tenancies. Somebody is asking, should I still use fixed term tenancies now, or just start with periodic tenancies?
I wouldn't change too much now. Just carry on doing what you're doing, because we don't know when the renters' rights bill is going to come into effect. So crack on with your AST for the time being, and then as long as you're aware that you will need to make an adjustment at some point, I think just go with that.
Yeah, that's a really great point, because
That's
you've got to carry on regardless under the current system until such time that they tell us that we can't. I think is the general gist of it. Yeah. Okay. Great question. Any others?
Another one for the Section 8. What kind of evidence do I need?
Section 8.
No, sorry, the rent reviews. Sorry.
Oh, Section 13. So I think you need to be looking at sort of comparable data. So looking on sort of the web, the property portals like Zoopla, Rightmove on the market at the point that you're actually doing the review. So when you're generating it, so you print. I would print them off. I would go through print them off, save them down. So that is your evidence. You could always speak to agents as well, or approach us, obviously, because the properties that we manage, obviously we use that as part of the data pool as well, so we compare it against other rooms and properties and other properties in the local area. So speak to us and we can potentially help you if you're based in sort of the Kent area where we are. Okay, that's the answer.
Any other questions?
There's one question on the chat. I don't know if you can see that one from Salim. So under the new system, can you advise the tenant 8 months before to cover any time taken for the matter to go to tribunal?
So 8 months?
You could, but it doesn't come into effect until the effective date. So that's a good one. Until the final meat on the bone, is detailed, we don't know is the honest answer on that one. We do know that obviously we're going from this 1 month period to 2 months notification minimum. But do you have any strong views on that one?
So you can give more than 2 months notice.
Yeah, well, you can in the current system.
Yeah, you can give more than so you'll be able to give more than 2 months notice, but it can only then go to the tribunal as of the point that the notice expires, during that period that the tenant can actually apply. So as a landlord or agent, you don't have any say in that. You'll just get a letter saying the tenant has contested it. So you could send the letter, but the tenant probably won't be able to apply to the first tier tribunal until they're in that 2 month period. So I wouldn't waste too much time leading up to it. Again, just keeping it fair and communication with your tenant, and then I've never known a case to go to the first tier tribunal. There will be a lot more in social media, and bounding around, that tenants can do this. But I think if you've got a property that you look after and you're a sincere and a genuine landlord and you care about your tenants and the property and you communicate with them well, I don't think you can have any problems with rent reviews going forward. All right.
Okay. Fantastic. Okay. I'm just going to go back to where we were. Okay.
I'll try. I'm conscious of time, guys. We love having you all on this call. Sorry, but I'll try and whiz through as best I can. So just to finish off on the preparing for disputes, as sort of came up in a question, having evidence in your back pocket should it go to a dispute, then you just sort of help cover your backside further down the line. All right. Can you pop to the next slide, please? Okay. So in the new world of Renters' Rights Bill, bidding wars on properties is going to be banned. Now, it's not something that we use, but some agents and landlords may, if they've got several applicants for a property, they'll say, well, what's your best price? And then it then comes down to the price. Now, personally, as a landlord and an agent, I have never liked that idea, because I think in the companies that I've worked for prior to Life at Lettings and more high street agencies, and we'd see that quite often the person who's prepared to pay the most is not necessarily the best tenant. And that's what it comes down to, is finding the best tenant for that property. And somebody who's happy to chuck another 50 quid on the rent could be a very bad tenant, or at the bottom of the rating of those potential applicants. So personally, I don't see it as a bad thing. You can still do, like, I think the mates rates if you're going to let below it. Or if you do find that you quite often get into bidding wars, then just set your price higher. Set it higher, and then you can always get chipped away at it. So, and I think that's like a lot of things. Rents are going to go up, and then we're going to have to just to accommodate for extra costs and things, memberships that we need to be part of, but also for if you are have a property that is quite prone to getting into bidding wars. So advanced rental payments. So tenants paying, say, for example, 6 or 12 months rent in advance, again, will be banned. So it's something that we're not going to be able to do. And I think this is something that has really let down the industry, especially those who are potentially more vulnerable. But you can also look at people with low credits that may not be able to pass credit checks and rely on paying 6 months in advance. You could have foreign nationals that are coming into the country that aren't able to get a guarantor, a UK-based guarantor at least. Don't have a credit history, or necessarily an income. You can also think about if you've got, say for example, somebody who is downsized, or they have sold their home, they've downsized, so potentially like a pensioner, so hasn't got an income other than pensions, but they're downsizing to then live off the capital of their former home. So they've got cash in the bank, but they don't necessarily have an income. So they won't be able to be paying 6 or 12 months in advance, which I think is a shame that it's going to affect the market. Now, it has been said that if your tenants are currently paying 6 months in advance or paying advance payments, now in the new world, those tenancies can continue, and any new tenancies will not be able to have that privilege going forward. Okay. And lastly, on this slide, the first month's rent. So this is quite one that I've spoken to a few landlords in the last couple of weeks who weren't aware of this one. So as it stands at the moment, when we find a tenant, we have to take a holding deposit, and then when they come to move in, we will take the balance of the first month's rent, which is the first month's rent minus the holding deposit, and then they would sign their tenants agreement. Now, in the new world of Renters' Rights Bill, requesting or the first month's rent prior to a tenant signing the contract is deemed as a prohibited payment. So what that means is the tenant has to have a sign, so they need to sign it, landlord needs to sign it, it needs to be executed prior to the tenant or the landlord agent requesting that payment. Okay, so this does cause a bit of concern. I think again, it just comes down to communication and making sure you're finding those right tenants and you're making them aware of what they need to do. There are sort of insurance products out there in the marketplace. So our rent and legal protection company do offer a service. It's part of their rent and legal protection that if a tenant tries to do this, they will then backdate and pay the first month's rent. So it's just something to be aware of as we move forward. But again, I think just communication and finding that right tenant in the first place makes a massive difference. And hopefully you won't come across this very often, if at all.
Just conscious of time because we've been on. Yeah, time is flying. We've got so much to share with you. Hopefully, this is of great value and information to you. So do put in the chat. Great stuff. Enjoying this, loving it. This is news to me. Whatever comes to mind. We have got a few more slides to go through, just 2 or 3 more slides, and then we will break for questions as long as you want us to be here within reason. So I appreciate it is going on quite late, and thank you for staying with us. So we've got to plough on to the last one. But,
there's 4 slides remaining, guys. And,
let's go.
I'm going to cover it. This is a quick one. Fortunately, this has changed recently. We've left it in there. So Labour are looking to really change things with guarantors, put massive restrictions in it. Fortunately, that amendment was pulled recently, so we can still have guarantors, which is great. There is still potentially some limitations on what the guarantor can do. Again, it's still to be decided, but there was big talk of maximum of 6 months worth of liability to guarantors, month's rent that is. There's also the liability of a guarantor ending at the point of a tenant's death as well. So there's still some stuff sort of bounding around. I don't have a lot more information, but generally good, because I know the restrictions that we're going to read out were quite severe, and it didn't really know where we would get a guarantor going forward. But yeah, so some good news, but potentially limitations there. I think we can try and update people as and when we know a bit more on this one.
And that's one thing to note, actually, because you've signed up for this webinar tonight. You will receive communications from us, not inundated, but you will receive great little nuggets like that of key updates as and when we receive them. So keep a watch this space for those updates as they come available.
Right,
so what is AWAB's law?
So AWAB's law and the Decent Home Standard. So these are great things that are going to be coming in. Fortunately, they're going to be phased in at a much later date. So AWAB's law, you may have heard in the press. So unfortunately, it was Awab Ishak who died back in 2020. Unfortunately, he was living in the social housing sector, and there was severe damp and mold in the property, which contributed to his death, unfortunately. So AWAB's law is coming into effect into social housing this October, so not affecting us in the private rental sector just yet. However, it's going to form part of the Decent Home Standard. Now, the Decent Home Standard is basically a set of criteria to say if your house is decent, funnily enough. There are going to be 5 criteria, which I'll go into in a second, but the key thing is that they're not looking for the Decent Home Standard in the private rental sector to come in until about 2035 to 2037. So as part of the Renters' Rights Bill, this is one of the very late ones. So again, I think it's a great thing that it's coming into effect, but it gives us a bit more time to digest everything else that's happening, and this one can be dealt with a bit further down the line. So Decent Home Standard is looking at things like that there's no Category 1 hazards in your properties, that it's reasonably modern, it's got reasonably good facilities, there's no damp or mold, which is AWAB's law, and the final one, which links into what we were talking earlier, that there has to have a reasonable degree of thermal. What's the wording?
Thermal efficiency.
It gives it a funny wording, but it's basically EPC rating C. So this is why they're letting the EPC sort of creep up to band C. They'll then bring in a Decent Home Standard, and it will be part of that. So that's why they put it 2035, 37 to make sure everybody's definitely there. Probably allow for a bit of time for it to be dragged on, the EPC ratings to be dragged on a bit further as well. Okay.
Fantastic.
So private rental sector.
Now this might be a surprise to some landlords.
Yeah. So the private rental sector database is basically like a one-stop shop for landlords. So it's a place for landlords to get information about their responsibilities, but it's also going to be their visibility of their properties as well. So potential tenants will be able to see, what properties the landlords have, the certification they have on them, how they're managed. So quite a lot of information that's going to be out there. So I think generally good. I would like there to be a database on tenants as well. That would be great, but one step at a time. Now, it will be a legal requirement for all landlords to be members of the database. If you don't, there could be penalties. I think they've talked about up to about sort of £7,000 sort of civil penalty notices. You will also not be able to gain possession of your property if you're not a member on the database. Okay, so that's obviously a massive one. So again, there's probably going to be a cost to this, and we've been told it'll be a reasonable cost. But again, if that's an extra cost to landlords, well, where's that going to go? It's going to go back on the rent, so rents go up. Okay.
Now, this isn't necessarily a brand new thing, because obviously Wales and Rent Smart Wales has had something similar to this for quite some time already, where every landlord has to be accredited. So it's not completely new. It's just new for England market in particular. Scotland and Wales have already had something similar.
And then just to touch on the landlord ombudsman, so this is going to be basically it's like a mediator. So to prevent cases either going through the council or through to the courts, the ombudsman are going to act as a bit of, to help sort of mediate any disputes between tenants. So I think a good one for this would be sort of pet disputes, and we'll get onto pets next slide actually. Yeah. But any disputes about having a pet, it will go through to the ombudsman rather than anywhere else, and then they will try and meet, and they will have powers. Again, you will have to be a member of the ombudsman. So as agents, we are legally required to be members of an address scheme or an ombudsman.
Yeah, have been for several years now.
Yeah, for a long time. So this is now it's the landlord's turn to join. Again, there will be penalties if you don't join. So up to sort of, I think it's at least sort of £7,000 worth of penalty notices. I think that for repeat offenders that can go up to about 40,000. So it's one where it's well worth doing and joining. But you won't be able to advertise or let a property without being a member, and that applies to the database as well. But again, you won't be able to get possession if you don't join. So it's quite an important thing. Again, there'll probably be a cost to that. Where's that cost going to go? Back on the rents. So
okay, and this is irrespective of whether you've got one property or 100 units. It's the same across the board.
Yes,
and it's also true if your properties are managed by a letting agent. If you're a landlord in ownership of buy-to-let properties, you still need to register on the scheme.
Yeah, and who you use a managing agent will also be on the database. That's another bit of information that'll be chucked on there.
Yeah, but there's no new thing there to letting agents because, like you say, we've had to be a member of one of the 3 property redress
We would just need
schemes
to we'd need to make sure that as landlords, because we need to make sure that you are actual members of that service, and that'll be part of the.
Yeah, we have a duty to check that you are compliant.
And the last slide.
Yeah, we're getting there.
So pet requests. So Who Has Pets? There was a PDSA sort of animal charity survey back in 2024, which said 51% of adults in the UK have pets. Now, I've got pets. I've got 2 crazy kittens running around at home at the moment. I've always had pets, and I think ruling out pets, personally, this is my opinion. Not necessarily that of the agency, but as a person, I think by saying no to pets, it's always been you rule out, similar to other things that we just discussed tonight. If you say no to pets, you could say, well, there could be loads of very good tenants. So I think with pets, it just comes down to finding the right tenant. If they're the right tenant, there's a good chance that they will look after that pet. So under the Renters' Rights Bill, you can't unreasonably refuse a pet request. So you need to give reasonable justification why you're not doing it, or you're not happy for a pet. So again, this is going to be evidence-based. So the tenant will need to request a pet in writing.
Can you think of an example there?
Of a pet, or
no, of a reason why it might reasonably be refused.
Yeah. So there's a couple. So one sort of big one would be head lease or superior landlord in a block of flats. Yeah. Quite often in the head terms, it will say no pets because they need to consider the impact on the other tenants within the property. So that could be one. You could say if the property isn't suitable, it could be a 5th floor flat with no outside space, and they've got a Great Dane in a 1-bedroom flat. And you can well, to be honest, it's not very good. Where's it going to go? Some people, there's a lot of chat going about, if you've got a landlord's got allergies and they want to move back in there one day, and that's a bit of a weak excuse, to be honest. But what you need to do is they would need to put it in writing. You need to respond whether you agree or decline the request within 28 days. If you do need to extra time to apply to the superior landlord to ask their permission, then I think you can allow the extra 7 days within there to go and to get that request. But again, keep it all in writing, keep it all documented.
I think the biggest challenge that we're seeing with this one coming through is kind of like the balance of fairness of whether we can take any additional compensation for that for potential damage. And there's a lot of talk about that at the moment. It's backwards and forwards, isn't it? This is the one that hasn't been quite thrashed out, isn't it?
Yeah, so Labour had put in that they wanted to offer pet insurance, which we thought, well, that's great. At least there's something for the landlords there. They pulled that
3 days ago.
Yeah, this is what happened.
Literally this week.
The second day of the report stage in the Lords. So they pulled out saying, well, no, the industry's not ready for it, so we're going to scrap it. So the one of the Tory peers got in there and said, well, actually, how about 3-week security deposit specifically for the pets, so separate from a 5-week security deposit that you may pay for the actual property itself. And that made it through. It is on the bill, but it was a little bit but it's got to go back to the Commons yet, where they have the majority, and it could get thrown out. But I think this is actually a much better option than insurance, because insurance, a tenant could be paying it every month for, they could be in a property for 5 years, and if they're paying out £20–30 a month, I think overall they'd be better off if they paid a one-off deposit, separate deposit. At least they get that back at the tenancy, and the landlord's got a fair size pot to protect the property.
Fair point.
Yeah, so watch this space, but at the moment, 3 weeks security deposit for pets is on the cards, but anything can happen.
Wow. Okay, that was a lot of information in quite a quick period of time. Time has absolutely flown by tonight, and I see there's lots of you still online. So firstly,
thank you for being with us
on a really warm evening. I'm sure you'd rather be somewhere else having a gin and tonic or a beer. Maybe you are. I can't see you. But yeah, hopefully you've gained loads of useful information there. I will just reiterate that this is for you. Loads of questions coming in. Mailer, on that note, is there any key ones that we haven't spotted or seen that we can perhaps go to some questions now, just to use the last sort of 5–10 minutes to sort of wrap up and close up?
Yes, so we've got a few. If I go from all the questions I have, and you can tell me if you want to answer them or not.
We'll flip a coin as to who gets to answer it.
Well, I don't know which of you would rather do it. So there's a one for EPC here. So are there grants or funding available to help with EPC improvements?
Yes is the answer. There's a useful, if you go onto Gov, I think it's called Help Me Heat or something. If you type in the gov.uk, it does bring up a page which will link you through to sort of local authorities, and you can find out where you can get certain support. I've not gone into it in the detail. I just know of the page. I think it's Help Me Heat or something. So yeah, just Google that. It's a gov.uk page.
There is also I can't think what the word is I'm looking for. An implied duty on the utility providers as well. The name of it has gone completely out of my head, but all the major big utility companies have a duty to offer incentives for improving properties where possible.
Yeah.
The only caveat is when you start to deep dive under the surface of these, is generally speaking they tend to be means tested. So it is often beneficial if your tenant applies for these rather than you as the landlord, because you won't be able to apply for them in the first place. But also if your tenant is receiving some kind of benefits, that generally goes in their favour.
Yeah.
It's not always the case, but generally if they're receiving benefits of some kind, they will be more likely to get some incentives.
May, if you got another one, check it out.
Yes, so about mortgage, rates are still high. So is it worth remortgaging yet?
Well, I would say you've either been investing for a long time and used to the really low rates that we all have been used to. But yeah, I would agree that the figures are still quite high, but you've got to do your due diligence as to, it's what are you comparing that against? So as I gave in my slide, rates are coming down from 4.7, lower than that, 4.5, and down as low as sort of 3.8 for personal mortgages. Compared to doing nothing and your product expires and you go on to standard variable rate, you could be paying 9–10%, which is certainly not going to do any favours to your cash flow. Okay, so it's all relative, and I would say you just have to make that assessment. If you're on a variable rate, it might be fine to stay put as you are at the moment. But if you've been on a fixed rate for a period of time, you can only base it on what's available in today's market, and you need to make an informed decision as to whether that's worth it. But again, that's something we can help you with the tenancy health check. We can look at all these different variables as what is going to give you the best return for your particular property.
Yeah, just quickly scroll through the chat. There's one from Emma. I think it was regarding it was the policing one. I think we followed on. So, for example, what we discussed, you can't sell for a period of time after eviction. The local council will be policing this and taking action against the landlord.
I think I understand where you're coming from. Yeah.
So not necessarily policing it, but if your former tenant were to see it, then you could be in a spot of bother. To be honest, there is what's it called? Operation Jigsaw, I think I've heard of, which is basically a nationwide team of enforcers that will be sort of ensuring that the elements of Renters' Rights Bill will be enforced. So, and I don't know a huge amount about that, to be honest, but that could be one thing that they're looking at. So they could be seeing stuff that is leaving the market. I don't know where they would get their data from, but it's not really worth the risk, because
I think one thing we do know for sure is we are seeing that all local authorities are trying to employ more people to actively
Yeah.
make fines stick,
Yeah.
in simple terms. If they are paying salaries for those people, they have got a duty to try and get fines in. So, yeah, this is why. Get your properties compliant. Be on the right side of the law, doing things correctly and above board, so that if they come knocking on the door, you know with clear conscience you've got a squeaky clean property that you're not going to have any issues with. But that's what we can help you with in tenancy health check. Go through all your compliance, make sure you get all that buttons down, so that you don't get any nasty surprises. And some of the fines are astronomical. You're talking 30,000, 40,000 pound fines, possible imprisonment on the HMO side of things if you're not doing things to licensing or fire safety issues. You know, the fines are horrendous. However, let's solve those problems before they become problems.
Yeah. Okay.
Great stuff.
Mailer, is there, across time, is there any
Yes.
sort of, short ones that we can quickly jump on?
So I've got a question from Nicola. Selling a rental, renewal of fixed term. Most tenancies only allowed viewings for sale in the last 2 months of the agreement, or
Yeah.
when notice has been given. Is it worth introducing an anytime viewing clause so that property can be on the market, and to allow an offer once a buyer has been found, and give notice when the buyer has been found? Or is it best only to offer for sale with vacant possession?
I think, to be honest, this is a sort of having your cake and eat it. I think if you're, first of all, putting in a anytime viewing clause would be, you know, you'd have an issue of quiet enjoyment at that point.
Absolutely, that's where
potential
my
harassment. And tenant ultimately has the right to say no at any time to viewing. So I would, rather than forcing it, I would work with the tenant. Now, if you're going to, we had a property in the past which was looking to sell. It was an HMO, and the sale took so long that tenants wouldn't stay, and then it got to the point that we would relet it because it would have sold, and then it fell back through. And unfortunately, we were losing tenants all the time because they were trying to sell it, but tenants didn't see the security there. And I think if you're trying to keep a tenant and doing viewings, you know, again, if there's communication there and they're happy with that situation, then why not? It gets to a point where you've got to be, what do you really want out of the situation? I don't know if that answers it.
If I can just interject with my investor hat on, as a portfolio landlord myself, there's a couple of things here. Vacant possession generally will achieve you a higher sales price on the back end, because you're not inheriting potentially bad tenants or bad history and all the rest of it. However, as a landlord investor, I don't want my property sat there empty, not giving me any rent and covering my mortgage costs and insurance, and I could get double council tax if I've got a property sat empty for a long period of time as well. So you're at loggerheads with this, where you want to sell it and get the maximum profit for it, but also you don't want to be carrying a really expensive liability in the interim as well. So there may be other strategies that you can look at there that remove your responsibility and burden of looking after the property, but gives you the same kind of peace of mind that you can move on in your journey. And that's what we're having discussions with landlords at the moment as one option. Great question.
Just see a quick one there, Mailer. When the Scott has said, when is deadline for joining the database and the ombudsman? We don't know.
Nobody knows.
I can direct you where to go for those at the moment, because I don't think they fully
been designed.
So again, this is information that's going to come out over the next couple of months. I think once it has actually passed and got royal assent, that's when more this information will start trickling out, and obviously there will be a period before the commencement date of the bill, just to allow people to get ready for it. And this is quite often the case with bills. We've talked about the Housing Act 88 this at the start, which we're still working within. That came out in 88, but it didn't actually, the commencement date wasn't until sort of mid-January in the 89. So, they always allow a bit of time. So I think if we do get royal assent and it all goes through at the start of September, it will be late to autumn into the winter before anything really happens. It may even be in the new year. I don't know.
I think the overall message from this evening, if nothing else, is whether we are your managing agent, and I see some of our clients online, which is fantastic to see you. Hello this evening, and if you're our future client, all the better. Stay in touch with someone that knows what they're talking about, and we would love that to be us, because there is so much change going on at the moment. You need to be kept informed. We will give information out in the form of newsletters and briefings as and when we get the important information. Thank you for the lovely comments from Nigel, Della, Paul, Nicola, Darren, Scott, Matthew. glad you've got massive value out of this evening. This is the purpose of these events. Please take us up on this free offer. I just want to make sure that that is still visible. Yes, if you refer to the offer, it should be at the bottom of the chat. You've got the book your compliance health check with us now. I will more than happily go through some of this information, and if we get inundated by requests, this man will step up to the plate as well and do some as well. But yeah, we look forward to seeing you further on future webinars. Mailer, that is a really good point. I have stupidly forgotten to write down the date. I think I know it, but you are far more organised than I am. When is the next webinar for our lovely audience?
We are thinking of the 15th of October.
Which I believe is a Wednesday, is that right?
It's a Wednesday, this one, yes.
So these will be quarterly, and the date or day of the week may change slightly, but generally middle of the week, something like that. So Wednesday, the 15th of October, put that in your diary for now as a placeholder, and more announcements will come out in due course. Mailer, is there anything before we wrap up and close that I have completely forgotten?
No, that's it.
Fantastic. Yeah. Alex, any other closing?
Yeah, I just want to, obviously, a massive thank you to everybody who's joined us this evening. Obviously, it's our first webinar, and I hope you've taken a lot of information away. And yeah, if we can help further, let us know. Don't be put off with this. There's a lot of information, and at first glance, some of it can seem quite pessimistic, but say we are in an industry of creative people, putting property deals together and buying and selling and letting out properties is a very creative industry, and there's loads of people out there who are happy to help and discuss these things. So it's all about knowledge and getting the information and understanding the changes is the key thing. And if you don't understand it, speak to us. We're happy to help. If you don't want to know about it, speak to us, and we can help you with your properties, and we can take on that burden for you. So
yeah, whether you're looking to sell or stay in the market, I think we've got a solution. But like the name says, we're here as a lifeboat, so we're here to help predominantly. So if we can help you navigate through the regulations and make your properties more profitable, or package your portfolio up for retirement, if that's what you're choosing to do, I think we have an option for anyone. So thank you very much for putting your trust and time with us tonight. I see still 30 of you still online, so fantastic that you stayed this long. I won't hold you up anymore, but it's without sounding like a too honest, it's good night from me.
It's good night from me.
Thank you very much, and look forward to seeing you in October, but do be in touch. Many thanks.
Take care.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.